Good morning, church. Can you believe it's already Thursday? I can't. Time really flies. But I pray this past week has been an opportunity and a reminder to you of how good God is. And I pray that you will continuously stay close to Him as we begin our mornings and our days with Jesus. With that, let's go ahead and begin. Have you guys had those moments where you wake up one day, you look at the mirror, and you're just not happy with the weight gain that you've had? I definitely do this, and I've been doing it these days as I look at myself in the mirror and I notice my belly kind of coming out and the fat on my neck starting to come back and haunt me. But because of that, it gets me to look online and search for articles and websites for advice on losing weight. And I'm sure maybe you can relate to that. Maybe you feel like that right now, or maybe you've had that experience before. And you run into a lot of different websites that have these really enticing articles that say things about losing weight, but most of them say things like, the secret of losing weight, the secret of being healthier, or you want to lose weight in 1 week, this is the secret, right? Things like that. And being the curious guy that I am, I always click on these articles because I want to know the secret, right? I want to start looking good again. I want to start losing weight. And so I look, and then you find out it's basically all the things that your parents taught you and you learned in grade school. So it's really not that big of a secret. But one thing that I noticed and I realized as I thought about myself and my situation, that we're really not content people. Right? We always want more. We always want better. We want faster, stronger. We want to be on the next level, right? We're just not content people, if you really think about it. When you come home from school or maybe from work, it's dinner time, no one's at home, it's just you, and you're hungry. So you go to the fridge, you open it, you're looking at each of the shelves, and the fridge is packed filled with so many different kinds of food. Open the freezer, a bunch of frozen food, so many options. But after a few minutes of looking, you close the freezer, go back to your room, and you call your parents, and you're like, hey, there's no food. Can you buy some food on the way home? We're just not content. And I've done this quite often too. But even if I have a roof over my head, I have food in my fridge, I have a car to drive, a phone to use, clothes to wear, sometimes it's just hard for people to be content. And that's just kind of what we all are, right? And maybe you too are just not content with who you are, what you have, or where you're at in life. And because of that, we all kind of naturally are looking for a secret, right? And that's the secret to becoming content. Now, Paul ends his letter to the church in Philippi with this ideal of the secret of being content. Look at Philippians 4:11-12. It says this: I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Now, first of all, what does it mean to be content? Now, Google says to be content means to be satisfied, to be in a state of peaceful happiness, right? And it's really interesting because Paul says that he learned to be content whatever the circumstances. And I think this is so crazy, right? Whether the fridge is full, the fridge is empty, whether he had loads of money or pockets empty, Paul is saying that he was content. He had learned contentment regardless of the circumstances he was in. And think about it this way too. When Paul is writing this letter, he's in prison. Talk about having nothing. Yet he was content. And not to mention, in his whole life, he knew what it was like to be in need. He knew what it was like to have everything. He knew what it was like to be hungry and to be well-fed. But Paul, regardless of any situation he had been through, he learned how to be content. And that's the thing. Being content is something we have to learn. It's not earned. Paul makes it very clear. Becoming content is not something that happens naturally. Even for Paul himself, someone that went about spreading the gospel message and planting churches, he had to learn how to be content. And I think we have this misconception where we think We see Christians that are super close to God and they're super holy and they do all of these things. They're like, wow, they're so like religious, right? They're so holy. And of course they know how to be content. And maybe one day, if I get to that stage, if I get really close with God, then yeah, I can say that too. I can become content with whatever happens in life. But just like any other Christian value and virtue that we have, and because of the sheer fact and reality that we are born into sin and we are sinful in nature and we want to do the things that we don't want to, or we know we shouldn't do, but we still do it, this is why Paul says we have to learn how to be content. And we too have to take up this challenge of learning to be content. So if we have to learn how to be content, what does that look like? What is the secret of learning how to be content? Well, Paul doesn't leave us on a cliffhanger, and he shares it. Philippians 4:13, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And I love this. You see, what Paul is saying here is that this is the secret to how we can be content, whatever the circumstances may be. And that's in Jesus. It's the gospel message that allows us to find contentment in all circumstances. But I want you to notice how Paul sets up the argument here. He's contrasting. He's saying good or bad, in need or in plenty, well-fed or hungry. So clearly what we can learn is that it's not about having things that give you contentment, nor is it about not having things that give you contentment. You see, Paul's contentment had nothing to do with what he did or did not have. In order for Paul's contentment to remain constant, it had to be found in something that was also constant, and that is in Jesus Christ. Church, we have to remember the fact that we are citizens of heaven and just travelers, tourists here on this earth. And we have to remember to frame our mindsets to reflect the humility and the obedience of Jesus. And we also have to remember, instead of putting our confidence in things of the flesh, to put our confidence in knowing who Jesus is. There's a calming peace and satisfaction when we discover all of these things. And for Paul, that is the secret to contentment. So I want to leave you with this prayer and a reminder. Lord, help me to find my contentment in you. In a world filled with inconsistency, help me to find my contentment in you, the only consistent thing in this world.